and Lewy body dementia. So please bear with me. Not all dementias are Alzheimer's. It's true, you know, that all dementias are not Alzheimer's. And I know, because I too have dementia, but it's not Alzheimer's. Mine is called Lewy body dementia. My type of dementia is so different from Alzheimer's that I actually wrote 2 books about it. I can tell you it's just a horrible type of dementia. Because when I am out and about and talking to people, I look okay, I talk okay, and my memory for most of the time is pretty good. So people look at me and say, "What's he up to?" There's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with his memory. And he's supposed to have dementia? Still, to this day, people associate dementia with memory loss only. Let me tell you a little bit about my Lewy body dementia. When I am feeling okay, I am out meeting people and sometimes trying my very best to be good. They don't know what it's like behind my front door, what it's like in my mind when I am so full of fear that I'm actually afraid to leave the house. They don't know that I can wake in the middle of the night and try to look around in a room with just a nightlight and try to figure out, who am I? Where am I? And who is that person lying asleep next to me? They don't know that I could spend 10 minutes curled up like a little child, crying quietly, terrified of waking the stranger that's next to me. Then the stranger will wake up and hear me and ask me, "Am I okay?" It's only her voice that I recognize, and that is the voice of my wife. And then the tears really start to flow. Because I realize I haven't even recognized my own wife, Elena. I don't have dreams anymore. I go to hell when I go to bed at night. Sometimes I'm murdering people, moving dead bodies. And believe you me, I'm giving you the mild version of my dreams. I have a fear inside of me. I feel like a child locked in a room with a vicious dog and no way out. The fear is not real. The fear is unfounded. But to me, it's all too real. If I'm at home alone, I can see people passing the window in broad daylight, even though there's no one there. I haven't been able to drive in over 5 years because I see cars coming that are not there, but yet I can see them. And to me, they are real. That's why I can say not all dementias are Alzheimer's. If a person like me who suffers from hallucinations, please don't disregard what we are saying. Try and put yourself in our shoes. If I tell you there's a cat in the room, don't tell me he's not there. Ask me, do I like cats? And if I say no, open the door and hunt him out. You might feel foolish trying to hunt out a cat you can't see. Then ask me, is he gone? But also ask me, do I like cats? And if I say I do, that can start the conversation. Did I have a cat? What was his name? You know, It may even make a person like me smile and be happy again. Another example is if I tell you, this man here in the front row, he has a knife and he's trying to kill me. If you tell me that there is no one there, I do not and will not trust you. I can't, because I see him with the knife and you're in cahoots with him. You want to kill me also. That is some fear to have, and I do live with that. All I want and need is for you to tell me that it's okay, that I am safe, and as long as you're around, I am safe, and that you will not let anyone harm me. Then I can believe you, then I can trust you. That, my friends, is just a small glimpse into my world and people like me who have Lewy body dementia. Can you now see why it's so important to get a proper diagnosis? Can you now see that not all dementias are Alzheimer's? I am not for 1 second taking away from anyone who has Alzheimer's. But there are days, especially my bad days, when I wish to God I could not remember the night that's just gone. I wish to God I couldn't remember them. I call my Lewy body dementia a nighttime dementia. But let me finish on a positive note. I do have a lot of good days, a lot of wonderful days, and especially a day like today, when I'm standing in a room with such wonderful people as all of you. So please remember, not all dementias are Alzheimer's. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I think that stories like yours should be incorporated into medical textbooks, because otherwise, for young doctors, it is very difficult to imagine, and I think it is extremely useful to have them. Thank you. And our next speakers are Petri, Lampinen, and wife, who will be speaking about their life and their experience. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, good morning. Me and the frontotemporal dementia, how did we meet each other?
I do not know how to give a definite answer to this, and I am sure that neither do the medical professionals. I do not have a genetic inheritance for this disease. There has also been no history of dementia in my family. I have lived very healthy life since childhood. Some neurologists have told me that the blows to my head have exposed me to this disease. However, there is no point to consider why I got frontotemporal dementia. I'm living a new phase in life, and it brought a lot of things to my life.
Of course, I have lost some things, but I have received a lot of new ones to replace them.
I have also made new friends because of the illness, and this is a great thing. The hardest things happened in the early stage of the disease. I consumed a lot of alcohol at the time, and I lived very carelessly. I took on debt to maintain a careless lifestyle. I'm still ashamed of the damage I have done, and I do not think I will ever forgive myself for that. I also acted in the reckless matters secretly from my wife, and at this point I completely lost her trust.
I was pleased, got by her on these things.
Then I had to admit to her my drinking problem and my carelessness. I took a toll, but the end of the secrecy of the things made the life easier for both of us. The children of the family went through a lot too, and this point in our relationship. This period with the difficulty of getting a diagnosis was a very stressful time.
Afterwards, I have wondered how have we been able to go through all this.
An elderly psychiatrist told me during my ward treatment that my frontotemporal dementia includes neuropsychiatric symptoms such as alcohol consumption and spending money. His words made me feel a little easier, and perhaps through this, those close to me understood my carefree life better. Secrecy and coping with things in the world of work had also caused me insomnia. That 2 years period before seeking treatment was a not healthy, brain healthy time. Fortunately, I live a healthy life these days and avoid things that impulsivity can cause damage to. When I got the diagnosis, we were satisfied. We knew this way that my changed behavior was about. I no longer consumed alcohol and I was under the close supervision of my wife. I gradually regained her trust and I'm very grateful to her for that.
I joined the Finnish Memory Association.
They trained me to speak for dementia. In this way, I can facilitate the attitude of someone else who have fallen ill on dementia or their loved ones. I have also given face to dementia, and I hope that is a way to remove stigma in relation to this disease. I can also use my excessive impulsivity to do sensible things. I never heard of other dementias than Alzheimer's before I got sick. I also thought that the dementia is an illness only for older people. Over the years, however, I have noticed that the awareness of these issues has spread, but not all memory disorders are treated quite the same. Frontotemporal dementias are not the same kind than other dementias. I have behavioral symptoms. In this form, the symptoms can vary a lot. I have challenges with attention, concentration, impulsivity, and short-term memory. I have noticed that I have learned new things over the years. I knew how to use to help to support my daily coping well, and I have also developed them.
I understand English language better than before and I can write it too.
Before, I didn't know how to do these things. I have never been author of articles before or the speaker. I'm now using openness, courage, and inhibitions to illness to help me. I feel that with dementia, I have received a gift that I now use it for benefit all of us. I now have a new life task after working life, and I feel more meaningful every year. Frontotemporal dementia doesn't control me. My wife and I taking the common road forwards. Sometimes it was hard to make the journey, but it's not worth remembering this time too much. The lesson I learned from this space was that from now on I will be looking for help in time and I will be open about difficult times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for keeping on time despite you were 3 for this presentation. And still, we have a quick question here for Petri and Kevin. What would you like medical students to know about your type of dementia? But maybe, as I see already Carmel here, that you start, and we can answer these questions in the end of the session. So the next speaker should be Helen Rochford-Brennan, but unfortunately she is not able to be with us in person because she got sick. And I hope she will be soon better, and I hope that she is watching us. So say hello to Helen, maybe, because as I know her, she is with us. And I would like to give the floor to Carmel, her companion, who will introduce herself and tell us her story.
Thank you, Eva. Can you hear me? Yes, I'm here. Unfortunately, Helen couldn't travel due to a health issue, but hopefully she will be back on the road again very soon. For those of you who know Helen, she's determined and will continue to build awareness. So I'm just going to read out her words that she sent, and I've done a collage of photographs to show her involvement through the last 10 years with media. So thank you, Carmel, for presenting my words today and being a powerful support to me. I wish I could be with you all, but unfortunately it was not to be due to my illness. I hope you're all enjoying the conference, and I want to say a huge thank you to the Alzheimer Europe Board, Jeanne, Diane and Anna, and all of the team for the amazing work you do, and to my colleagues in the European Working Group of People with Dementia. I have enjoyed a wonderful 8 years, during which many changes have taken place. But please keep up the good work. We need research and cures for the many different types of brain disease under the umbrella of dementia. My first public interview, TV interview, she was accompanied by her son, Martin. I'm just going to say this because it was on national TV, and she was the first person in Ireland to go on national TV and say she was living with Alzheimer's, which was huge because there was such a stigma attached to it. So she's saying, it was my first public patient involvement experience on a national stage, and an opportunity to talk about personhood and why my voice and that of my family matter. This has been followed by many years of interviews and the opportunities to discuss person-centered care, and also the ensuring I am fully integrated into my community. I am no different to any other person with a chronic illness and should not be treated differently because I have brain disease, that of Alzheimer's, and it's important that I'm fully integrated. To break down the stigma and my community can see I can still function pretty well. And this was an interview she did, it was recorded last November and it came out in January at home. And this is a comedian who now does a chat show, and he doesn't know who the guest is that's going to come on. So it was fun. I'm going to give you just a little bit of it. Is there sound? No sound.
Memory. So what happened yesterday is pretty grey. So it's about living, trying to live within that day, and knowing that whatever you have, whatever you've done today is going to be, I remember I met you. Will I remember the conversation? No, I will not. I may remember parts of it, but I certainly won't. And it is difficult to live with it, but it's livable with. But you have to have strategies too. I think that's what has sustained me, to be honest with you. Okay. Working really hard every day, getting out and getting out in the fresh air, getting out and meeting people. I mean, if it's only just walking the dog down the road. Sure. I mean, I've got to meet a few people and we'll all have all the news of what's happening in the world, so I may go home and I've forgotten about it, but that's okay. Yeah. I've met somebody and I've talked to somebody and I've done something that has helped me in that moment.
So, I need to stay socially active. I do not want to be cut off from my society. My brain health is important, very important. I need to stay mentally active. Technology has been a lifeline for me, especially during the pandemic. I think people around the world depend on technology to survive and to keep their brains active. Coming from a business background, marketing is close to my heart, and I feel social media is a great tool for sharing expertise and experience. whether through work and the research with the Alzheimer Europe, the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland, my work with EU Mental Health, the Global Brain Health Institute, the WHO Knowledge Transfer, and many more, I share this with the world. It truly has an impact on knowledge exchange and dissemination, and it helps researchers, especially our young researchers who are starting out. By increasing my visibility, I am encouraging and empowering others with brain disease, especially Alzheimer's and the other dementias. We need to have our voices heard. The great thing about social media is I can check in and out at any time and update myself on the most current information regarding any illness or what is happening in the world. I have always been interested in world affairs and continue to be interested. Social media is a terrific way of communicating and connecting with one another, and it's also an invaluable way of connecting with colleagues and friends, making new connections across the world. I can raise my voice on important issues like we need inclusive communities, not friendly. As you all know, friends come and go. We need inclusion of all disability. Over the last year here in Ireland, it's been important for me to share my voice on the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Bill. On social media, something of most important is I find empathy and kindness, and many of you here may have heard me say over and over, kindness matters today. I leave you with quotes and kindness. I leave you with quotes and kindness by Martin Cofield. If we all do one act of kindness daily, we just might set the world in the right direction. So try a little kindness on social media. By doing so, you are empowering somebody else with many different types of dementia. And these are just slips. That's from Helen. And I'd just like to say Helen asked me to support her from 2017. I was a primary carer for my mum, and I lost my mum in 2014, and we got a very late diagnosis. We had no idea. It was mixed dementia. I hadn't a clue. And for 3 years, I just existed. And then I heard Helen speak at a conference in Dublin. And my whole life, and I suppose one of the most important things was my dad died from cancer, and I used to say, God, I hope I get cancer rather than dementia. And then I met Helen, and I thought, oh gosh, no, I'll take dementia, that's fine, I can cope with this. And like now I see with the working group, and I came to Europe with Helen, and I saw all these amazing people, and they've enriched my life, and just, of course, and the thing we're campaigning for now is that they can remain in the workforce. Why would you leave? You are still capable of working up to a certain point when you know. Is my time up? So I just, Helen was one of the founder members of the working group at home with the Alzheimer's Society, and that's a huge part of her life. And when she came to Europe, that just, I suppose the others will probably agree and echo this, it gives you a life, it gives you anonymity, it shows that I am still functioning at a very high level, I am still contributing, whether it's to education, research, policy change, because through Europe they go to the Parliament, and when you have to talk to your politicians up front and let them see that you are well able, and actually now some of the politicians are being affected themselves by dementia. So they're starting to see, and because I used to hear it was the aging process which cracked me up, it's not the aging process. There's so many other factors involved, and of course it can be diagnosed now as young as in your 30s. So it's really, and it's opportunities like Alzheimer Europe Conference where we get to meet everybody and we exchange. And now that the public patient involvement and engagement, apparently, is the next word to it, we're involved in research and we have to be there from the beginning, and you can see why. Thank you.
I,  'cause, 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 'cause,
Thank you very much, Carmel. And yeah, I can only read and repeat what was written here. Carmel, thank you for representing Helen so well. Aisling. And I would like to thank you very much. And I would like to say that it was my honor and pleasure. I'm currently a stepping down chair of Alzheimer Europe after many, many years on the board. And I have to say that I really enjoyed working with Helen and now also working with Chris and with everybody from the group, because it is such an enriching and great experience. And yes, I will be missing you, of course, but I think that it is the life course that is necessary. So thank you very much, and the floor is open because your time is perfect, Carmel. We can ask questions, or we can also answer questions, because we have still one question pending for Petri and Kevin. What would you like medical students to know about your type of dementia? If you want to answer, it would be great. I think you can use this one. It's more comfortable.
The question was probably we'd like medical students to know.
Yeah.
Keep an open mind. There are 400 different types of dementias. And although Alzheimer's makes up 60 to 70%, there's another 30 to 40% of us that have a different type of dementia. And like Carmel said, there is such a mixed group of us in the working group, both in Ireland and in Europe. And all our voices need to be listened to. You know, you have to stop going down this one avenue of dementia. I wish to God there was a word that could replace it. If we just said Alzheimer's brain disease or Lewy body brain disease, and get rid of the word dementia, because it damages the disease that we have, because it's put under such an umbrella. So my advice is just keep an open mind on what you're doing and look beyond Alzheimer's. Don't look past it, by no means, but look beyond it.
Thank you very much for your wise words, and I would like to add that people are individuals, and there are many individual types of dementia in different individuals, and it is also necessary to remember for our medical students. So thank you for the questions. And our next speaker is Jeroen Bruinsma from, sorry for mutilating your name, from Netherlands, who will speak about the story behind closed doors, a case study exploring the lived experience of a family of a person with the behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia. So Jeroen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's quite the honor to be here and present to you one of my papers. It's a bit difficult. Is it possible to show the slides on the screen on the back as well? No?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Then I'm just going to stand a bit like
The
this.
presenter.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Carmel is a caring person.
So they're not on this screen? Yeah, this will do. Yeah. I can go back. Okay, so I'm going to talk about one of my papers, and as you can see, it's a case study for which I've closely followed a family with a father who had the behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia. And I followed them for a couple of months. Before I tell you all about it, I will give a short introduction. I'm currently working as a postdoctoral researcher at the Health Promotion Department of Maastricht University, and I finalized my PhD in April this year, and it was about family caregivers of persons with young onset dementia, and I did this research at Maastricht University. And one of the papers in that dissertation was this case study. It's a bit of an unconventional study because you only use one case. I'm very proud it's available online. It's been published recently, so make sure to check it out if you're interested in this. We're going to talk about frontotemporal dementia, and it's a very diverse form of dementia that can be characterized by changes in personality, behavior, difficulties with language, but also motoric symptoms. And my talk is going to be about the behavioral variant that is often characterized by symptoms of apathy, a loss of empathy, compulsive behaviors, impaired social cognition, and often a low awareness of disease. Good side note is that the majority of people with frontotemporal dementia have a symptom onset before the age of 65. And it's a very diagnostic challenge to recognize the diverse symptoms at such a young age. So there's a delay in the diagnosis, and initial symptoms are often attributed to burnout, marital problems, or midlife crisis. And we know that the long delay of the diagnosis often results in high levels of uncertainty in the family members that are involved in the care process. We also knew from earlier work that the symptoms of the behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia have a disrupting effect on family life, because spouses often have to combine care with employment, and children may still residence at home. We also know that there's limited research available on family life and young onset dementia, and that most of the research is focused on spouses or children. But the family itself is hardly ever a unit of analysis. So our aim was to use the family as a unit of analysis and really look at them as a microsystem. Something to put into perspective, in my dissertation we also looked at the more broad experiences of caregivers. We did a focus group study that you can see on the screen. And this case study really helped us to gain a more in-depth insight in the interaction between the symptoms and family life. So this is why we started to recruit one family who was willing to participate in such a case study. And this was actually quite a challenge, and we were very happy with the support of the Dutch Frontotemporal Dementia Peer Support Organization and the Dutch Knowledge Center on Young Onset Dementia. And we recruited this family to do a qualitative case study with interviews, and we wanted to follow them for a couple of months to see about their experiences over time instead of just one interview. So we did semi-structured interviews, and we did this with individual family members to make sure they were able to voice their own perspective. And we did a follow-up interview after 4 months to explore their experiences over time, but also because family life is very complex, and it allowed us to deepen the findings, clear any ambiguities that there were, and check the preliminary results with the family. Because if you write such a case study about one family, it's very important that they support the results as well. Then, about the family itself, they lived in a rural area in the Netherlands, and they had a family business. It was a very important part of their life. And the father had the behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia. He still lived at home, received the diagnosis 3 years before the interviews, and he currently participated in the daycare facility for 4 days a week. The mother of the family, his wife, still combined care with employment. She worked nearly full-time, 4 days a week. And there were 3 children involved in the care situation. They were in the late 20s and early 30s. And the oldest son was still living at home. He took over the family business after his father was diagnosed. And he was highly involved in the care process, but he did not perceive himself to be a caregiver. This is also why I talk about family members who organize care instead of caregivers. Then about the current symptoms, the family stated that the personality of the father with the behavioral variant had changed very much, and we also saw a lot of behavior changes, very compulsive and repetitive behavior. Just to give you an impression, he was actually very difficult to get a conversation with. He constantly sang one-liners, putting off and on the lights, changing the channels on the TV. And it was very difficult for him to understand and react on the emotions of others. The family also discussed a lot of social inappropriate behaviors. Especially towards others and especially towards females. And there was a very low awareness of disease. And this made it very difficult to include him in the study. So unfortunately, it was not possible to interview him at this stage. Then about the results. we actually heard that the early symptoms already changed the roles, responsibilities, and the interaction patterns within the family system, and that these early symptoms, they started approximately 5-6 years before the diagnosis was established. And slowly, the role of the father changed within the family system. He was named as the pater familias, who was really the head of the family. He had a very strong opinion. The family lived up to his expectations and his standards. But this role slowly changed in the years before the diagnosis. He became indifferent, didn't make any decisions anymore, became less involved in the family matters, and the family business started to deteriorate over time. And it was very difficult for the other family members to take over responsibility of such an authority within the family. I have a quotation of the oldest son that nicely illustrates this. He said, my father always knew what he was doing, but gradually I got doubts. Does it add up what he does? Why am I still here? However, before I was able to leave the family business, things had to be arranged, but that was his responsibility. So basically, I was stuck. We also found that the relationships in the family became more distant. To exemplify, the youngest two, they fled out of the house, hardly came over to visit anymore, and his wife even considered filing for a divorce. As the symptoms increased, we also found that the interaction between the family members changed. They started to discuss their worries, particularly with regard to the road trips the father started to make, without providing any explanation to where he had been, and then he was gone for a couple of days. That was very strange behavior for the relatives. And they decided to take away the car keys to force him to go to the GP. And then the diagnosis was actually quite quickly established. In the perspective of the family, they had a very late diagnosis, but a very quick GP, because they themselves had postponed visiting the GP, because they thought about a midlife crisis and marital problems themselves. I'm not really sure what own help-seeking behavior refers to, but the diagnosis, at least, it really helped them to gain a new perspective on roles, the responsibility, and the relationships. I have a quotation from the mother as well. She tells that the diagnosis is devastating, but also a relief. I thought now it's me who's going to make the decisions, but more as a caregiver than as his wife. So it nicely illustrates that she took over responsibility, but also had a different perspective on the relationship that they had. And the daughter stated, the positive effect of the diagnosis was that it helped me to understand and realize our complicated relationship was not only my fault. So it really helped also to reflect on things that happened in the past before the diagnosis. Then in the phase after the diagnosis, the family started to organize care at home. And we saw that new roles, relationships, and new interaction patterns formed during this process. The decisional balance within the family completely shifted towards the mother and the sons, who were highly involved. They formed some kind of an alliance in organizing the care at home. They experienced that this had created more cohesion between them, and that their relationship had actually improved by organizing care. They communicated more often about things that they didn't discuss before the diagnosis was established. And they were on a joint mission to be as resourceful as possible to make sure the father with the behavioral variant could live at home as long as possible, because that was his wish. On the other side, we also saw that these family members who were highly involved in care, they emotionally detached from the father. One of the sons, for example, said it was very, he perceived his father to be a part of the furniture, and that it was very difficult to stay emotionally attached to him. He said, we feed him, we supervise him, and he pulls off a happy facade. So I think this quote is quite intense, actually, but it also illustrates how the changes in the behavior and the personality of the father influence the relationship that the family members have with their father. On the other side, we also saw that the daughter of the family had a very different coping style. She had more need to grieve about the loss for her father, and out of a mechanism of self-protection, she distanced herself from the caregiving situation, but she also felt guilty for not supporting her mother and her brother and her father. And yeah, she stated during the interview, I think everyone has different needs in coping with this, and I don't necessarily need to cope with this the same way my brothers do. I need more space to grieve. So what can we learn from this case study? I think studying a case really in depth allows you to obtain unique insights that you miss in studies that often focus on the broader perspective. I think this study also highlights that there are certain abrupt shifts in the caregiving trajectory. Changes in roles, relationships, and interaction patterns accompany these abrupt shifts. I think for the future, there's a need for a more system-based support approach to support the family as a whole, and it is particularly important to account for individual differences in this support approach. Also, to create a mutual understanding and the right expectations towards family members who are more distant from the caregiving situation. And that such an approach might help families to organize care altogether. I want to thank you for your attention. And
thank you very much, Jeroen, for a perfect presentation and perfect timing. Do you have any questions? Before you have, may I have a comment? I would like to warmly agree with you and to argue with you, because you said that it is unconventional type of a case study. But I would like to appreciate it very much and say that medicine is built on case studies in many centuries. And unfortunately, maybe it is a failure of dementia research that did not look into case studies that much, because they provide description, understanding, analysis, finding most important things, putting evidence together, and thereafter it is possible to measure, evaluate it quantitatively, whereas I'm afraid that we did measure lots of things that we were not understanding much about. So thank you very much for this attitude. I think it's very valuable. Are there any questions, please, any other comments? Oh, yeah, I see. But I do not see whom. Yes, thank you. Maybe a microphone, because we are online, so that...
I run an organisation called the Childhood Dementia Initiative, which is representing a group of the dementia population which is largely unknown even by people at this conference, and that is children. There is a subset of our community who are children. I really liked your case study and the taking into account the psychosocial impacts on the whole family unit and the need for changing systems of care, in particular for the entire family unit. I'm interested in what you do next with that case study and how you take it forward to start to influence some of that change.
Yeah, currently I switched my position. So I'm currently my job is totally different. I'm involved in a project about the prevention of dementia. But I'm very sure that these research results will stimulate, because in the Alzheimer's Center Limburg, we do a lot of psychosocial research. And a very important part of my dissertation was also the partner imbalance intervention. It might ring a bell to some of you. And currently, this psychosocial support intervention focuses on individual caregivers, such as spouses or children. So I think one of the implications could be that you, as a healthcare professional, could offer this intervention to different family members to make sure everyone in the family is involved, and everyone could work, for example, personal goals to make sure everyone in the care system, the microsystem, is in line. Yeah.
Thank you. And I saw next one. Yes, please. Can you take the microphone in here?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Debbie, I'm an Irish speech and language therapist. I just have a question about that particular type of dementia. As you mentioned, language difficulties are real big issues there. I was just wondering, it seemed like the communication with the family was quite challenging. I was wondering, was he linked in with therapies? Was he linked in with a speech therapist or an OT or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the communication difficulties primarily came from compulsive and repetitive behavior.
Okay.
So we had no difficulty with interpreting speech. We had
Okay.
no difficulty with speaking itself.
His understanding was challenging, though, yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
and the behavior was really repetitive. So constantly singing one-liners from songs, for example,
Yeah.
and not being responsive to what others were saying. So I think the difficulties in communication in this particular case were very linked to compulsive and repetitive behavior instead
Okay,
of.
as opposed to a language difficulty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you once more. Great presentation. And let's go on. Our next speaker is Hanna Bodde from the Netherlands, and she will speak about prevalence of young onset dementia in 2 defined catchment areas of the Netherlands. So the floor is yours, Hanna.
Thank you. Today I'm going to tell you about the P23 study, which is a consortium study in collaboration with Alzheimer Nederland, Nivel, and several Alzheimer centers in the Netherlands. And I work in the Alzheimer Centrum Erasmus MC, and we worked on the prevalence of young onset dementia in 2 defined areas in the Netherlands. Yeah. So we speak of young onset dementia, and then we mean when the first symptoms start before the age of 65. This was recently defined by Dennis van der Veen and colleagues in the Delphi study. And we find it important to differentiate between young onset dementia and late onset dementia, because people with young onset dementia often show a different pathology, they show other early symptoms, and they have other care needs than people at an older age. They sometimes still have children living at home, they often have a job, and they are socially and physically more active, so they have different care needs. However, the specialized care is limited, so they often have to make use of care meant for older people. So if we want to arrange enough healthcare facilities meant for younger people, we need to know how many people with young onset dementia there are in the Netherlands. And that's why we wanted to investigate the prevalence. So there's been quite some studies around the world on the prevalence of young onset dementia. Here you can see a few of them. And what you can see is that there are quite some differences in outcomes. This could be due to differences in methodology. I will come back to this a little bit later in my presentation. But first, let's look at the Netherlands. Currently, we are not quite sure about the exact prevalence in the Netherlands. So around 10 years ago, there was an expert estimation. However, this wasn't based on any scientific calculations. And then in 2014, there was an inventarization in 6 memory clinics. However, it only involved memory clinics, so only a small part of the whole healthcare trajectory. And then recently, there was an estimation done by Alzheimer Limburg. This was based on a meta-analysis done by Stevie Hendricks and colleagues, was also done within the P23 study. But this estimation was based on the numbers of different studies in Europe. And we don't know if we can one-on-one translate this to a specific area in the Netherlands. So what we wanted to do was not only involve the memory clinics, but involve the whole Dutch dementia healthcare trajectory. And what we did was we asked all healthcare professionals who work with young onset dementia to register each person they came across in an online database for the duration of 1 year. And we did this in 2 different areas, in an urban area and in a rural area, because we wanted to check if there's a difference in prevalence depending on if people live in a big city or if they live in the countryside. Well, here on the right, you can see the 2 different areas in which we did our year prevalence measurements in. And we asked these healthcare professionals to register each patient only once, to register some information, but also some information which would then form a unique code, so we could check if people were registered by several healthcare professionals and make sure we wouldn't count them twice or multiple times in our prevalence analysis. Well, currently we are still working on our prevalence analysis, but we do have some preliminary data that I would like to show you. So here on the left, you see the age at diagnosis in both our registration cohorts, so the urban area in dark blue and the rural area in light blue. And what you can see is that the biggest group is formed out of people that got their diagnosis between the age of 65 and 69. So this means that it's very important which kind of definition we use for young onset dementia, because this will have a very big impact on the prevalence number that we'll end up with. In the second and third graph, you can see the different diagnoses that were made in our registration cohorts, which were very similar to each other, and is also similar to other prevalence studies that have been done. Go a bit quick. We also looked at the diversity background in both areas. So what you can see here is in dark blue, you can see the diversity background of the standard population of the areas we did our measurements in. And in light blue, you can see the diversity background of our registration cohort. And what you can see very nice in our urban area is that we are missing some people with a non-Western migration background. This could be due to different reasons. For one example, we think it could be that some cultures make less use of healthcare facilities, like nursing homes, and therefore they take care of their family at home, and we miss them in our registrations. When we look at our rural area, it looks like the diversity background of our standard population and our registration cohort is more alike. However, I want to point out that 20% of the people in our registration cohort were not specified as being having a Dutch background or otherwise, so we cannot say this for sure. Finally, we have some results on the living situation of the people in our registration cohorts, which was that most of them were still living at home, either alone or with a spouse or children. I also want to tell you a little bit about our experiences with this research. So first of all, we noticed that it's not realistic to include general practitioners in this kind of research. Because in our first measurement area, we contacted around 350 general practitioners, but we could only include 12 of them, and we actually got data from 3, I think. So that was very difficult. Also, what is important is that you're very dependent on other healthcare professionals. So I could be very motivated, but I needed to motivate other people to work for my study. So sometimes I really felt like some kind of cheerleader or stalker. This takes time. And sometimes it could take over a year before I got somebody motivated to join my study. And this meant that actually the data got added retrospectively instead of prospectively. So after the study year was already finished. Then we had a lot of setbacks because of COVID-19, as you probably can imagine. So we started our first year prevalence measurement on the 1st of February of 2020. And then at the end of February was when COVID hit the Netherlands and we had our first lockdown. So this meant that healthcare professionals were a lot busier, so had less time for research. But it also meant that people made less use out of healthcare facilities, like day treatment. So it might have been that we missed some people because of this in our registrations. And then finally, we noticed that for this kind of study, it's better to use date of diagnosis instead of date of symptom onset. We could really see this when people were registered by multiple people, because the date of diagnosis was often very similar, but there could easily be a year difference or even more in the date of symptom onset. Well, before I go to my conclusion, I want to discuss a little bit the two main methods there are to do prevalence studies. So first of all, you can do a prospective study, which is the study we did. It has an active case finding, and the benefit of that is that you can choose which information you would like to gather. Also, it is thought to be more accurate than retrospective studies. However, as we've seen in my study, it's very time-consuming and therefore expensive, and you end up with small sample sizes because we could never ask everyone in the Netherlands to be involved in our study. So the second method you could use are retrospective studies. These uses a passive case finding. So for example, the clinical database of a hospital or data from an insurance database. And the benefits is that you easily have a very large sample size, and it takes a lot less time because the data is already there. However, because the data is already there, you cannot get any additional information. And because the data is gathered not with the goal for your research, you will more often have a misclassification bias. And such a data is often only a part of the healthcare trajectory, so you are missing people that are in a different stage of their disease. So to come to my conclusion of what we know till now, an active case finding method like we did is quite challenging, but could be a very interesting way to get some information about a specific population in a specific area. However, if I think of the ideal prevalence study method, I don't think the ideal prevalence study method exists yet. However, I think I would do it if I only wanted to know the exact prevalence number and no additional information, would link several databases together. So you have information out of the whole healthcare trajectory. And I know that they're currently working on this in the Netherlands. So hopefully this is a way we can do this kind of prevalence study in the future. To follow up, what are we going to do? We're going to finish our analysis on the exact prevalence numbers in both our study areas and also get some additional information about the specific registration cohorts. And what we also want to do is get some data from general practitioner databases and use this data to validate our own measurements because we missed this kind of data in our own research. So yeah, I would like to thank all participating healthcare professionals because I couldn't have done it without them, and my colleagues, especially Janne Padma, my supervisor, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much for this brave study. It is not really easy to get data on prevalence, especially in this field. Are there any questions, please? Before you consider your questions, I would like to ask you a question. What was the alternative? I think that without general practitioners, it would not be possible to do it. What professionals you addressed?
So people from memory clinics, so neurologists, hoe zeg je dat? Geriaters?
Geriatricians?
Yes, thank you. Dementia case managers, people working in nursing homes. So after the general practitioner, we got a lot of people involved. Also psychologists who see people with dementia. But it was, especially the general practitioners who we couldn't get involved because it's such a small part of their caseload.
I think it is a general experience with general practitioners, I would say. It's always a problem. And you have registered then. What about GDPR? So, GDPR about data protection or some...
So we made some registration, but we only got data that couldn't be directed to the exact person. So it was still anonymous. So for example, we got, in the Netherlands, we have a personal number, but instead of getting the whole personal number, we only got the last 3 numbers. So we only got a little part of that, so it was not, you could not know who it was.
So you were, it was anonymous?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? If not, I do not see anybody. No, not any additional here online. So thank you very much. It was really interesting. And our last speaker, last but not least, of course, is Christian Bakker. Welcome, Christian, who will speak about development and piloting of an intervention for the management of disinhibition in frontotemporal dementia, about the focusing project. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be able to present the results of our study on the Focussen program. And I've not translated it, but Focussen means focusing in English. But we have it as an acronym for the study. And we did a clinical pragmatic trial using a case study design because we think that's an excellent way of doing research, Jeroen. And this is our project team, and I'm here also on behalf of Melissa Janssen, who's our researcher who has done all the work. So I'm actually presenting on her behalf as she couldn't attend the conference. And, well, Jeroen did an excellent job in telling something about the behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia. And disinhibited behaviors are very, very challenging, both at home as well as in a nursing home. And our study focused on these behaviors in a nursing home. So that's the context of our study. And at that phase, there's advanced dementia. So these behaviors are very, very challenging for nurses, for the nursing home staff, to be able to have someone have a good quality of life, but at the same time, how do you say, manage the behavioral issues at that point. And that's how the Focus program came about, because the team of the Waalboog, which is a nursing home in the eastern part of the Netherlands, developed a method together with each other how to manage these behaviors, disinhibition in behavior variant of frontotemporal dementia. And they called it focusing because they noticed that when they focused someone on, for instance, a person, or they focus someone on something else than, for instance, food, that would work. So they came to us, to our university, the Radboud UMC, University Medical Center, and they asked, help us develop this kind of method because we think it works. So we sat down and we performed a study, and we wanted to adapt and evaluate this existing intervention. And we had some research questions, and I'm very old. My eyes are 50 years old, so I have trouble reading. So I look a little back. And we had some research questions. What are the underlying mechanisms in this intervention the Waalboog developed? Because how does it work? Why does it work? And we also wanted to know how can we improve this intervention, and is it a feasible and acceptable intervention in other nursing homes, and how can we sustainably implement this intervention in nursing homes, because implementation is one of the most difficult things of implementing psychosocial interventions in nursing homes. So we had a multi-method design, and we first started with doing systematic observations. We observed people in the Waalboog, nurses in the Waalboog, performing the intervention. And we also looked at another nursing home who didn't work with the method, and we compared what did the people in the Waalboog do different than the nurses in the other nursing home. We also did a literature review about frontotemporal dementia, behavior variant of frontotemporal dementia, and we asked an expert panel to help us. And we used all this information to develop the intervention further and have a training program together with the Focus manual. You can see it here. We wanted to write a book that nurses can use on the work floor as a reference, but also use in the training. And we also developed an implementation guideline. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the multiple case study and process evaluation, because I think that's the most interesting part of the study. How did we evaluate? We did a process evaluation, and in a process evaluation, it sounds difficult, but it's actually not. Intervention quality is how is the intervention performed? Do the nurses take all the steps that are in the intervention, or do they not? We also looked at implementation knowledge, and that's a difficult word for looking at what are barriers and what are facilitators during the implementation process. But we also had to look at the effect. Is there any effect of the intervention? And our users, the nurses and nursing team, are they happy to use the intervention or not? And for the multiple case study, we only were able to include 6 people with behavioral variant of frontotemporal dementia. And we looked at these, we predefined their behaviors, and we predefined how the nurses should counter these behaviors using the method of focusing. And during the A phase, they would not use the intervention, but during the B phase and the extended B phase, they would use the intervention. We looked at differences between the A phase and the B phase and the extended B phase. I hope that's clear to you all. because we wanted to know what's the effect on disinhibited behaviors and on well-being of the person with behavior variant of frontotemporal dementia. I have to tell you a little bit about the intervention itself. One of the things we learned that, in fact, in the behavior variant of frontotemporal dementia, disinhibited behaviors can also be seen as automatic responses to stimuli. Stimuli from within the person or stimuli from outside of the person. And these automatic behaviors are not inhibited. And that's the central problem in these behaviors. But it's different from how nurses often feel these behaviors, because they feel they're intentional behaviors or they're just difficult behaviors, problem behaviors. But looking at automatic behaviors, and that nurses have automatic response to these behaviors and other people have automatic response to these behaviors, that's actually the problem. So Focusing as a method, and you can read it for yourself, so I won't go into all the details, but it's a multidisciplinary approach led by psychologists, and we are looking at patterns in automatic responses in the person with behavior variant of frontotemporal dementia. And we also are looking at patterns in automatic responses, and we use this to have a personal guide plan to manage the individual behaviors. And people with this variant of frontotemporal dementia sometimes are focused on their eyes, the things they see, sometimes on the things they hear, and that's different from each person. So we have to attune communication to the specific deficit. We have to attune the environment. We have to shift focus to other stimuli that create wanted responses, and we want to have the stimuli that cause unwanted responses. We have to remove those. So it's a complex intervention with both a guidance plan as well as a structured day plan, day structure for those people. And nurses have to be very, very strict in using this particular intervention. And for instance, communication, we tend to use verbal communication, but we learned in our study that it is important not to use too much language. Just stand there and point at the door if you want someone to go through the door. I'll show you some results of the case study we did and the process evaluation. I think it's very interesting because it was a very positive study, and it's always nice to tell of a study that has positive results. Nurses felt they were better equipped to handle the disinhibited behaviors. And they also noticed that they were not only focusing on the problematic behaviors anymore, but they were allowed to focus on the person with the person. Yeah? And also they felt that the frequency and severity of the problem behavior diminished. And they also noticed that the well-being of the person with frontotemporal dementia improved. And although the intervention was challenging for some of the members of the team, most of them felt they finally knew how to manage these difficult behaviors. They had some grip on the behaviors. So they would highly recommend the intervention to other nursing homes with people with behavior variant of frontotemporal dementia. And we also looked at the case study results, and bear with me with the graph. I hope you can see it. These are the A phase is the light blue line, and then you know that there are a lot of, we scored the behaviors in whether or not they were there, and as you can see there's a lot of behavioral disinhibited behaviors in the blue line. But if you see in the intervention is implied, it goes down rapidly. And during the prolonged B phase, in which we continue to use the intervention, there's still almost no disinhibited behaviors. And although this is not a randomized clinical trial, we think this is very helpful to see that there appears to be an effect on disinhibition using this particular intervention. So to sum it up, disinhibition in frontotemporal dementia can be regarded as an automatic response, and the focus program that's highly based on this principle seems to work, seems feasible, seems acceptable. So what we have to do next is look at larger groups, because you have to have interventions that are well studied. So this is only an indication that it works, and we also want to know if this focus and intervention might also work in disinhibited behaviors in other types of dementia. So that's for now. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Christian, for a very excellent and useful presentation. I think it's really important topic. Are there any questions? Yes, please, I see.
Hi, my name is Karen. It's really interesting to see the project and see the effect it had. But there's something in my gut or my heart that's saying, are we absolutely sure that these behaviours don't have, that the person isn't feeling something at that time? So are we also looking at what is the emotionality of that person at the moment? Is there fear? Is there just some kind of distress going on? And it's very good to maybe do what you're doing, and that helps the nurses. But and I know you said that the person was happier, but having seen lots of behavioural stuff done in the past in psychiatry, often it's at the expense of the person's real trauma or whatever's happening for them not being recognised. And I wondered if you thought about that in this intervention.
Yes, we actually did because we wanted to shift focus also from problem behavior to there's someone there, there's a person. And because nurses are focused on the problem behavior, we learned them not to focus on the problem behavior, but learn them on a different kind of interaction with the person with frontotemporal dementia, and thus changing also the outcome from the person. Because we noticed they were more relaxed, they were more happy, more comfortable compared to prior to the intervention. So I think it helped improve the relationship between the person with dementia and the persons caring for them. So I think, yeah, we did look at that.
Thank you very much. Yes, Carmel, please.
Hi, Christian. My mom had mixed dementia, so it was vascular and frontotemporal, but I didn't understand. The vascular, I knew had something to do with the heart, but frontotemporal, I had no idea. And the behavioural, there was no empathy, which wouldn't have been my mom, and her language use was choice at times. So these kind of things. But what I love that you talk about language, and because that was one of the things that fascinated me when I started to study, that 7% of communication is only through words. And it's our body language, it's visual, it's sign language, whatever. And sometimes all people need is a hug. And it's as simple as that, really, that we just put too much emphasis on the spoken word.
Yes, I actually agree, and we instructed the nurses to use less verbal communication and more non-verbal communication. Simply, when you look at someone, they will look back. If you don't look at someone, they won't look back. So you can use this, making eye contact, in your intervention. And it's very successful because when you look at someone, they will focus on you. And that's also some of the part of the intervention, focusing on you when it's needed, not focusing on you when it's not a good idea.
Thank you very much, and we have still time for one last question. Kevin, please.
Just that lady that spoke down there, as far as Lewy body dementia is concerned, when I feel tired or completely drained of energy, it's like a green light for Lewy body to take over. So the person's mood, the time of day, really plays into what way their disease is. Because when I'm busy, when I'm doing stuff like this, like there is actually nothing wrong with me right now. But like if you see me when I'm tired or when I'm at home or if my mood drops, it's like I'm giving the Lewy bodies permission to take over. And if I'm inside in a room that is completely quiet, especially in the morning, the noise inside in my head is unbelievable. And Carmel, you couldn't be more right. Sometimes all you need is a hug. That's it. You just need that little bit of reassurance. And I think every one of us with dementia, we probably needed that little, just that little extra hug and that little bit more. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. I think it was the best closing remark. Thank you, Christian, for excellent presentation. Once more.